It usually starts the same way. It's Saturday morning. The garage door is halfway open. The smell of fresh-cut pine is still hanging in the air. You got your tools laid out, the lumber stacked against the wall, and a plan you found online sitting on your workbench. You measure the first pieces. Everything looks right. Then, halfway through the build, you realize the dimensions don't match. The diagram shows one thing. The instructions suggest another. And now you're holding a piece of expensive lumber that doesn't fit where it's supposed to. And you're standing there, looking at the project you were excited to build, wondering where you went wrong. That moment is more common than most woodworkers admit. But here's the question that changes everything. What if the biggest cost in woodworking isn't the price of the wood, the tools, or even your time? What if it's the hidden cost of relying on plans that were never truly finished? Most people in this situation assume the problem is their own ability. They think they need more experience, better tools, more skill, but after looking deeper into how many woodworking projects actually fail, a different pattern appears. The problem often starts much earlier, with the information people use before they ever make their first cut. The real enemy is something I call the incomplete plan problem. A woodworking plan can look professional. It can have beautiful images. It can show a finished piece that looks exactly like something you want in your home. But a picture of a finished project is not the same thing as a complete building system. A real woodworking plan has to answer the questions that appear when you are standing in your own workshop. What size should this cut actually be? What order should these pieces be assembled? Which measurements matter most? How much material do I need before I go to the lumber yard? These details are where many individual plans fail. And this isn't just a beginner problem. Ted McGrath, a master woodworker, educator, and trainer with 25 years of experience, has spent decades seeing the same issue appear with woodworkers at different skill levels. After teaching workshops to more than 4,000 students, he noticed something important. Many people weren't quitting because they lacked motivation. They were quitting because the plans they trusted didn't guide them through the difficult parts. Think about the first situation. You find a plan for a piece of furniture you wanted to build for months. Maybe it's a dining table, a storage bench, a workbench for your garage. The design looks perfect. You spend time comparing options. You save the plan. You finally decide this is the weekend you start. So you buy the lumber. You clear your workspace. You begin cutting. Then you reach a step that says something simple like, attach the frame. But that sentence hides a part that actually matters. Where exactly does it attach? What measurement determines the position? What happens if the pieces are slightly different than the drawing? Suddenly, a project that looks simple becomes a guessing game. And this is where many people make a mistake that costs them more than money. They assume the problem is their ability. They think, maybe I'm just not experienced enough. But the truth is, woodworking is already a process with enough variables. Your measurements, your materials, your tools, your technique. The plan should remove uncertainty, not add more. The second situation happens when someone tries to save money by collecting individual plans from different places. At first, it seems logical. Why pay for a large collection when you only need one project? So you find one plan for a bookshelf, another for an outdoor bench, another for a cabinet, a few dollars here, a few dollars there. But eventually something happens. Your computer becomes a storage folder full of random files. Some have materials lists. Some don't. Some explain every step. Others assume you already know what to do. And when inspiration hits, you spend more time searching through old downloads than actually building. What nobody tells you about woodworking plans is that organization has real value. A plan you cannot quickly find is almost as frustrating as a plan you cannot understand. The hidden cost is not just the money spent on individual plans. It is the time lost trying to make disconnected information work together. The third situation is the one many experienced woodworkers recognize. You already know how to build. You have the tools. You understand the basics. But even experienced builders run into the same problem when a plan skips important details. A measurement can be slightly wrong. A cutting list can leave out a necessary piece. An assembly step can assume knowledge that was never explained. A small mistake early in the process creates a bigger problem later. And suddenly you are making another trip to buy more lumber. Another weekend disappears. Another unfinished project sits in the garage. The frustrating part is that you did everything you were supposed to do. You prepared. You invested time. You followed the instructions. But the instructions weren't complete enough to support the project. And here's what all three of these situations have in common. The problem is not the desire to build. The problem is not the willingness to learn. The problem is a gap between having an idea and having a reliable path to completion. That gap is where frustration, wasted materials, and abandoned projects live. After seeing this pattern repeatedly, a different question started to make sense. What if woodworking plans were created the same way products are tested? What if the instructions came after the building process, not before? That idea changes the entire approach. Instead of starting with a drawing and hoping it works, the process starts with building, testing, measuring, and refining. That is the principle behind the woodworking library created by Ted McGrath. The idea is simple. A useful plan should not only show what the finished project looks like, it should explain how to get there. This approach solves the three problems we just discussed. First, instead of guessing through missing steps, the plans include detailed instructions, drawings, materials lists, and cutting diagrams designed to guide the build. Second, instead of collecting random files across different sources, everything is organized into a searchable library where projects can be found by category, keyword, and difficulty level. Third, instead of starting from an untested idea, the plans are created around a process of building and checking measurements before they reach the workshop of the person using them. The library includes more than 16,000 woodworking plans covering furniture, outdoor projects, storage solutions, workshop projects, and many other categories. It also includes resources like woodworking guides, videos, and tools designed to help people understand the process. A good example is something many people experience when they start a custom project. They have a specific space, a specific need, maybe a cabinet that fits a certain area, or a workbench designed around their garage. Instead of trying to force a generic plan to fit, the system includes the ability to request specific plans based on individual needs. That changes the relationship with plans. The plan becomes a starting point built around the project, rather than a limitation the builder has to fight against. Now, there is usually one concern people have at this point. I don't have a professional workshop, and that is understandable. Many people imagine woodworking requires a large space filled with expensive equipment, but many projects are designed around realistic situations. A garage, a smaller workspace, basic tools, a weekend schedule. The goal is not to create unnecessary complexity. The goal is to create a clear path from an idea to a finished project. One example comes from customers who started with very little experience. One beginner woodworker described using the plans to complete a small bookshelf after only owning a table saw for a short time. The instructions gave him enough structure to complete something he was proud of. Another customer used a library to find a small chicken coop project. Instead of searching through dozens of unrelated sources, they found a plan, gathered the materials, and completed the build over a weekend. Different skill levels, different projects, the same principle. The information has to match the reality of building. That is why tested plans work differently. The value is not just the number of projects available. The value is reducing the uncertainty between starting and finishing. The interesting thing about woodworking is that most people already have the hardest part, the motivation. They already have ideas. They already imagine the furniture they want to create, the projects they want in their homes, the improvements they want in their workshops. But if nothing changes, 6 months from now, the same unfinished plans may still be sitting on the computer. The same half-built projects may still be taking up space in the garage. The same searches for better woodworking plans may continue every time a new idea appears. The alternative is much simpler. Having a reliable system where the next project starts with clarity, knowing what materials are needed, understanding each step, having access to organized plans instead of scattered information. It doesn't mean every project becomes effortless. Woodworking will always require patience, practice, and attention, but the process becomes focused on building, not constantly solving problems caused by incomplete information. You've already been doing the hard part. You've been learning, planning, trying. The plans just need to keep up with your ambition. Most unfinished woodworking projects are not proof that someone failed. They are proof that someone cared enough to start. The difference between an idea sitting in your head and a finished piece in your home often comes down to having the right information at the right moment. If you want to see the resource I use for woodworking projects, I left a link in the description. If this helped you look at woodworking plans differently, consider subscribing and share your experience in the comments. What is the one project you've always wanted to build but never finished?